You know, there's always those games that you first see and you're like, yeah, that's the game. That's the game that's going to be amazing and blow me away. Sadly, more times than not when that happens, the game is normally a letdown for me. However, when I first saw Judgment, at the time Judge Eyes, I knew that this game would be something special. I knew the game would strike the right chord for me. I mean, how could it not? I am a sucker for crime dramas and thrillers, and I love the way RGG constructs their games, so I knew this game would be nothing short of amazing. And I had to say, I had so much confidence in this game that I actually quit my job to review it. Now, don't worry, I start a new job in July. I'm not that insane. Although, that should be a testament to my expectations of Judgment. And I have to tell you, this game met them, beat them to a pulp, and surpassed them in more ways than I ever thought were imaginable. I guess that kinda spoils the review, huh? Well, I implore you to stick around for this whole review to see how my own eyes judged this game, and how I can say without any doubt that this game is indeed one of the greatest games that I've ever played. So with all of that said, on with the review. Judgment is the latest game from Gotoku Studio and acts as a spin-off of sorts of the mainline Yakuza series, set entirely in the Yakuza universe, but instead we take on the role of a private investigator, Yagami, and his ex-Yakuza with a heart of gold sidekick, no not that one, Kaito, as they investigate a string of murders throughout Kamurocho. However, as they begin to search for the truth, they start to unravel a conspiracy that no one really saw coming. If you were to ask me the strongest thing holding Judgment's story together, it would have to be the amazing cast of characters in this game. Each person you encounter is woven into the story perfectly, and no one feels out of place and rushed in. And each person has their own things that they bring to the table in terms of the overall narrative. By the end of my 30-some hour run in this game, I had fallen in love with almost every single character I came across, and grew to show some genuine hatred to others. The fact I was able to feel these levels of emotion from the cast went a long way, getting me invested in the story. The overall story itself was honestly some of the best storytelling I've seen in an RGG game to date. The flow and pacing of this game was nearly perfect. Even the filler and downtime moments flowed naturally to the point where I held off on doing a lot of side content because of how invested in the story I was. I really don't want to discuss the story in too much detail because of how much of a crime thriller this is, but you will find yourself gripping to the edge of your seat wanting to find out what happens next. I personally was so wrapped up in this story that I had to force myself to break and indulge in the vast amount of side content this game had to offer. New protagonists means new combat styles. Yagami has two different styles to use in battle, the crane style and the tiger style. The combat in this game is very specialized, as the crane style is meant for dealing with hordes of enemies, while the tiger style is best for one-on-one fights. That said, you're more than happy to try using them in different situations, as sometimes you have to rely on the tiger style to work on hordes of strong enemies. It should also be mentioned that Yagami is not built up to be a tanky Yakuza member, so if you go into this thinking you can brute force your way through everything, you are definitely mistaken. That said, Yagami has many things at his disposal that'll make quick work of enemies. In previous games, you normally had to break an enemy's guard in order to continue wailing on them. Well, in Judgment, enemies will still block your attacks, but because Yagami is a technical fighter, you can get creative with how to deal with an enemy's guard. You also have EX moves, which are essentially heat moves, and an EX mode. The EX moves are some gnarly stuff and have some pretty over-the-top action. And EX mode is like a burst mode that you will stay in as long as you have the meter for it. As long as you stay in this mode, you will receive reduced damage and will not be inflicted with mortal wounds. Oh yeah, speaking of Yagami not being built like a tank, I really meant it. Enemies will sometimes have a glowing aura about them and they will do massive attacks that deal mortal damage. You cannot tank these attacks outside of EX mode. I really have to stress that. If you are hit by these moves, your HP meter will be capped and you can only heal back up to that cap. You will have to go to the clinic or use a first aid kit to heal these wounds. These mortal wounds can be a real pain to deal with, especially if you are inflicted with them during a long fight or right before a boss. However, they serve the purpose of punishing the player if they overextend themselves. As long as you steer clear of enemies that are using your special moves, you'll be in the clear. So now that we got the idea of how the combat works, let's talk about the new gameplay features in Judgment. You are a detective after all, so you'll have to be gathering evidence for cases, tailing people of interest, and going on some reconnaissance missions. When you have to investigate the scene of a crime, you'll go into a first-person perspective and have to look for clues. You'll also have to use your trailer chase people of interest, and the trailing and chasing segments are some of the most thrilling parts of the game. You'll be free running through Kamurocho to nab whoever is trying to outrun you, or sometimes you have to make a daring escape this way as well. You'll also have to do some stealth missions by tailing a person of interest to find out where they're headed. These segments require you not to alert your target of your presence while maintaining a safe distance to them. With all the ins and outs of Kamurocho, you'll be finding many different ways to hide yourself. Honestly, I'm just scratching the surface of everything here. You have use of a drone to go around Kamurocho to spy on things, there are lockpicking minigames you have to do, and of course my personal favorite, disguise time. There is just so much thrown and offered for you to use that it's great. Nothing ever feels boring, and each event is just as creative as the last. This game gives you all the tools that you need to be the best detective around, and to kick the most butt around town too. It wouldn't be an RGG game without a ton of side content, and Judgment is definitely plentiful in that department. When you're not doing the main story, you can always have Yagami do his day job as a detective. Sub-stories are replaced with different sub-cases, and each one is dealing with troubles of many people around Kamurocho who need Yagami's help. What I like about these is that more times than not, they don't always end in combat, and are much more creative in their delivery. Plus, they also give a nice fat paycheck as well. There is of course your usual Sega arcades where you can play Puyo Puyo or an arcade port of Yakuza Dead Souls, gambling, and the like. But there are also plenty of new stuff for you to do around Kamurocho. In Judgment, the friendship events have been much more fleshed out compared to previous RGG titles. There are 50 different people around Kamurocho that you can befriend. These are all people working at varying restaurants or people you will find wandering the streets, but each one has your own mini story to tell. Because of this feature, Kamurocho felt much more alive and bigger, as because of these friendship events and subcases, you're often finding yourself going around to different parts around Kamurocho that you normally wouldn't have found yourself going to as often. Also new to this feature is the ability to get yourself a girlfriend. Instead of going to hostess clubs, you'll end up running into women around Kamurocho that you're able to date. Adds a bit more charm to Yagami's character. Once again, I am only scratching the surface on how much side content Judgment has to offer. You can go around drone racing, in which you can customize a drone to fly through different obstacles around Kamurocho, or you can visit a virtual Kamurocho where you explore a virtual city in a board game fashion. Or you can always relax at Yagami's office with a nice game of pinball. Seriously, that pinball machine is actually a lot of fun to play. There is so much more you can do alongside the main game that I will be easily coming back to it for more. Something new for an RGG title is that this game sports an English dub, and as someone who's had the mentality of English in my RGG Studio game, I had to play the game in English for the purpose of the review. And as someone who has heard the Japanese cast in this game, I can actually say without a doubt that this dub is phenomenal. In fact, there were moments where the main cast surpassed the Japanese dub. Sadly, this level of praise can't be extended to the secondary characters, but I wasn't expecting much there. They nailed it where it counts. Judgment's English dub has honestly eased a lot of my fears as this series ever returned to being dubbed. If the same level of care of the localization is consistent among future dubs, I welcome them to increase accessibility for the series. Also, the best thing about this is that the amazing localizers at Sega made sure to include the original JP script. This prevents the issue of dub titles, where the English sub over the Japanese dub is only the English dubbed script. You can even use this script when playing in the English dub as well. I really do hope this becomes the norm if they continue with the dubs, as it provides a great deal of options for all sides of the dubs versus subs spectrum. Similar to Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2, Judgment makes use of the Dragon Engine, and my goodness has the Dragon Engine come a long way since Yakuza 6. Kamurocho is more lively than it ever has been in RGG history. This is due to nearly half of the buildings around Kamurocho being explorable in one fashion or another. The game also continues to strive for 30 frames per second, and once again in most situations it can keep its cool. However, similar to other Dragon Engine games, once the physics engine is in full effect with a lot of enemies on screen, or when you are in EX mode, you will have noticeable frame dips momentarily. I think the worst case I had was that it dipped into the single digits, but it quickly recovered. And this was not a common occurrence either. But the issue is still there, although I am pretty sure these issues will all be fixed in a PC port of the game. The game still runs perfectly fine in most scenarios. Finally, I want to take a moment to discuss the OST for the game. If I had to describe it, it would have to be purely Sega. Each track used in each scene fits the moment perfectly, especially the music that played during intense legal segments. It really was the bow to wrap this entire package of it being a crime drama. Judgment is something you really need to experience for yourself. No matter how much detail I go into the game or how much I gush about this amazing game, I don't feel like I can do it any justice. Outside of some minor issues I have with the annoyance of random encounters with the Keihin gang and some technical issues, the game was near perfect for me. To everyone, there are games that define a generation for them, and for me, Judgment is that generation-defining game. It takes everything I love about crime dramas and turns it into a perfect video game adaptation. The only thing I hate about Judgment is that I won't be able to experience it for the first time again. I implore you to try this game if you are a fan of Gotoku Studio and their titles, or if you're someone who has a massive interest in crime dramas and thrillers. Judgment is a game that you do not want to miss, and it just makes me wonder where the series will go from here, and where will the other series go to try and top this game. Judgment, to me, is truly a masterpiece. Really, I can go on about Judgment all day. This game has really resonated with me, and I hope I was able to convey those feelings to you from the bottom of my heart in this review. I appreciate each of you who watched through this whole thing, and I do hope you have plans on picking up this game. If you have any questions or comments for me about Judgment or the review, by all means leave them down in the comments section below. I would love to hear from you. If this is the first time finding my channel through this review, hey, be sure to subscribe for future reviews, commentaries, let's plays, and more. And finally, I'd like to thank all of my patrons on Patreon and my YouTube members for making today's review possible. And as always everyone, thanks for watching.